The alien girl was crying for food. Her sister knocked on the human's door with an offer he never expected. Jace Cordovan had just cracked open his sixth drink when someone knocked on his ship's hull. Not the polite chime of the external comm. Actual knocking, metal on metal, desperate and insistent. The sound cut through the hum of his quarters. Nobody knocked anymore. They used comms, sent messages, followed protocol. Knocking meant desperation. He set down the glass and grabbed his plasma pistol. The 3-hour salvage run to the Kepler debris field had yielded nothing except radiation exposure and a cracked coolant line. Another loss to add to the tally. Another reason he'd been drinking alone instead of hitting the station bars. Through the airlock's small window, he saw 2 figures huddled outside. Blue skin, white hair, wearing rags that barely qualified as clothing. And one of them was crying. The sound was muffled but unmistakable, soft, hitching sobs from someone small, a child. Jace's grip on his weapon loosened. Whatever this was, it wasn't a threat, not the kind that required bullets anyway. He cycled the door open. A child stood there, blue-skinned with white hair that caught the station's harsh lighting like frost. Large eyes, far too large for her small face, stared up at him with the hollow desperation of starvation. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 by human standards. Her arms were thin enough to count bones. Behind her stood a woman with the same blue skin and white hair, marked with elegant white patterns that traced down her neck. The rags she wore hung loose on a frame that had clearly missed too many meals. Even starving, even terrified, she was striking. The kind of striking that made Jace's chest tighten in ways he'd nearly forgotten. She stepped forward protectively and lifted her chin to meet his eyes directly. "Please," she said in heavily accented human standard. "We need food." Jace lowered his weapon, tucking it into the back of his waistband. "How did you find my ship?" "I watched the docks. You were alone. Humans keep their word, they say." Her hands moved to the crude fastening, holding her tunic closed. "I can pay," she said quickly. That's not... "Please, my sister. She hasn't eaten in 4 days. I will do anything." The tunic slipped from one shoulder, revealing more of that blue skin, the curve of her collarbone, the swell of her breast. Behind her, the child continued to cry softly, swaying on her feet. Jace's mouth went dry even as something cold settled in his gut. She was propositioning him. She was offering herself as payment. And the worst part was the matter-of-fact way she did it. Like this was normal. Like she'd done this before. "Stop," he said, sharper than he intended. She froze, her hands still gripping the fabric. "I don't want that," he continued, forcing his voice softer. "Then what?" "Food. You said you need food. I've got rations." He stepped back from the airlock, gesturing them inside. "Come on, before station security sees you." Confusion crossed her features, quickly followed by suspicion. But the child whimpered again, and the woman's protective instincts won out over caution. She gathered her sister and stepped through the airlock into the vagrant star. Jace sealed the outer door behind them and watched as they both looked around his ship with wide eyes, taking in the narrow corridors, the flickering overhead lights, the worn but functional interior of a working freighter. The woman pulled her tunic back over her shoulder, her hands trembling slightly. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because your sister is hungry." She stared at him like he'd spoken a language she didn't know. Behind her the child had quieted, but her large eyes were fixed on him with desperate hope. Jace turned toward the galley, gesturing for them to follow. "Come on, galley's this way." His hands shook slightly as he moved through the narrow corridors to the main deck, adrenaline and something he couldn't name flooding his system. The galley was small, barely large enough for the heating unit and storage lockers, but he kept it stocked well enough. Protein bars, rehydrated meals, water purification tablets. Footsteps sounded behind him, light, cautious. He pulled down 3 ration packs and turned to find both sisters standing in the doorway. The older one had refastened her tunic. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes tracked his every movement. Jace handed 1 pack to the child first. She snatched it with both hands, tearing it open with her teeth. The woman took the second pack but didn't open it, just held it against her chest, like it might disappear. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." He gestured to the small bench bolted to the bulkhead. The child was already sitting, shoving food into her mouth with single-minded intensity. The woman remained standing, tense and ready to bolt. "You said you need passage," Jace said, leaning against the counter. She nodded slowly. "Threshold station, please. We have to reach." "Who's hunting you?" The question hit like a physical blow. She went rigid, her free hand instinctively moving to her sister's shoulder. "How did you—" Nobody stows away on a salvage freighter and offers to whore themselves out for ration packs unless they're running from something bad. Her jaw clenched, anger flashing in her eyes before the desperation returned. "Will you help us or not?" Jace studied her, the proud set of her shoulders despite everything, the protective way she touched her sister, the exhaustion carved into every line of her body. He should say no. He should put them off at the next station and forget he ever saw them. That would be smart. That would be safe. "Yeah," he heard himself say. "I'll help." Relief flooded her expression so suddenly that her knees buckled. She caught herself against the bulkhead, breathing hard. The child looked up at her, then at Jace, something like hope brightening those two large eyes. "But I need to know what I'm getting into," Jace continued. The woman straightened slowly, gathering herself. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They hunt children like my sister. They kill them. We've been running for—" A sharp electronic chirp cut through her words. Jace's blood went cold. He knew that sound, his proximity alarm. Something had just entered scanning range. The woman's face went white, her hand tightening on her sister's shoulder hard enough that the child winced. "They found us," she breathed. Jace moved before conscious thought caught up. He grabbed Kiva's wrist, pulling her toward the cargo hold with Lira stumbling behind them. "Smuggling compartment," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Under the deck plates, port side, get in and don't make a sound no matter what you hear." Kiva's eyes widened, but she nodded. Her fingers wrapped around his for just a moment, warm despite the chill of fear, before she pulled away and scooped up her sister. Jace pried open the hidden panel, revealing the narrow space below. It was barely large enough for cargo, let alone two people, but it was lined with sensor-dampening alloy he'd installed for jobs that required discretion. Lira climbed in first, folding herself small. Kiva followed, her body pressed against her sister's. She looked up at Jace from the darkness, her expression caught between gratitude and terror. "If they find us—" "They won't," he said, and sealed the panel. The proximity alarm chirped again, closer now. Jace climbed the ladder 2 rungs at a time, his mind already running through scenarios. Local patrol wouldn't ping his sensors like that. This was something bigger, something military. His hands flew across the console, pulling up the scan data. One vessel, sleek profile, heavy shielding, weapons hot. Not looking for a fight, they were looking for something specific. The comm crackled to life. "Freighter Vagrant Star, this is Patrol Vessel Sanctity. You are instructed to stand by for routine inspection. Acknowledge." The accent was there, the same lilting quality as Kiva's voice, but colder, more precise. Jace's jaw tightened. He keyed the transmit button, letting irritation bleed into his tone. "Acknowledged. Though I've got to say your timing is shit. I just cracked open a bottle of the good stuff." Pause. "We will be brief. Prepare for docking." The channel closed. Jace watched the patrol ship maneuver alongside, magnetic clamps engaging with a series of metallic thuds that reverberated through the hull. He stood, straightening his jacket and running a hand through his hair. Play it casual. Play it bored. The airlock cycled and 3 figures entered his ship. The first 2 were soldiers, tall, broad-shouldered with mottled gray skin and facial features that reminded Jace of predatory birds. They carried pulse rifles held at a deceptively relaxed angle. Professional. Dangerous. The third was different. Blue skin like Kiva and Lira, but his markings were darker, more angular, running down his face in severe lines. He wore a uniform that marked him as command, and his eyes swept the interior of the ship with clinical efficiency. "Commander Vreth," he introduced himself, his human standard flawless. "Apologies for the interruption." "No, you're not," Jace said, leaning against the bulkhead. "But I appreciate the courtesy of the lie. What can I do for you, Commander?" Brett's expression didn't change. "We're tracking 2 fugitives, dangerous criminals. They may have stowed away on vessels in this sector. Haven't seen anyone been solo for 3 weeks now. You won't mind if we verify that?" It wasn't a question. Vreth gestured to his soldiers, who moved past Jace with practiced efficiency. One headed for the cargo hold, the other toward the crew quarters. Jace forced himself to remain still, to keep his breathing steady. Vreth watched him with eyes that missed nothing. "You seem calm for someone whose ship is being searched," the commander observed. "Not my first inspection, won't be my last." Jace pulled a flask from his jacket pocket, actually filled with whiskey this time, and took a deliberate sip. Vreth's gaze followed the movement. "What's your business in this sector?" "Salvage, Kepler debris field. Spent 3 hours getting my lungs irradiated for a whole lot of nothing." "Unfortunate. Story of my life." Footsteps echoed from below. The soldier emerged from the cargo hold, shaking his head. Vreth's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The second soldier returned from the crew quarters with the same negative report. "Your cargo manifest," Vreth said, extending his hand. Jace pulled up the display on his wrist unit, transferring the data. Vreth scanned it quickly, his eyes narrowing at the list of broken equipment and stripped parts. "This is worthless material. Welcome to the salvage business." A sound cut through the tension, faint but distinct. A whimper, small and frightened, coming from somewhere below. Jace's heart stopped. Vreth's head snapped toward the source, his hand moving to his sidearm. Jace reacted on instinct. He lunged for the manual override on the cargo bay hydraulics, slamming his palm against the emergency release. The system engaged with a shriek of protesting metal and a hiss of escaping pressure that flooded the hold below. Warning klaxons blared. "Fuck!" Jace shouted over the noise. "Coolant line must have blown. I told the mechanic that patch job wouldn't hold." He moved toward the ladder, but Vreth's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder. "My men will check it," the commander said, his voice cutting through the alarm. "Your men don't know the system. You want them breathing coolant vapor?" Jace held Vreth's gaze, letting just enough concern show through his irritation. The commander's eyes searched his face for several long seconds before he released his grip. "Make it quick." Jace descended into the cargo hold, where vapor now filled the lower sections with a hazy cloud. The hydraulic system rattled and hissed, doing exactly what he'd designed it to do when triggered manually. Create enough noise and chaos to mask anything else happening in the hold. His hands worked the manual cutoff valve, taking longer than necessary, giving the sisters time to stay still and silent below the deck plates. The vapor began to clear. Jace climbed back up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Fixed, mostly. I'll need to replace the whole assembly eventually, but it'll hold." Vreth studied him for another moment before nodding to his soldiers. They moved toward the airlock, but the commander lingered. "A word of advice, human," he said quietly. "The fugitives we seek are more dangerous than they appear. If you encounter them, contact patrol immediately, for your own safety." "Noted," Jace said. Vreth's eyes held his for a heartbeat longer, then he turned and left. The airlock sealed. Magnetic clamps disengaged. Jace watched the patrol ship pull away, his hands braced against the console until they were out of sensor range. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He returned to the cargo hold and opened the hidden compartment. Kiva emerged first, her face pale, her whole body trembling. Not from fear. He recognized the look. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, and now that the danger had passed, the adrenaline was crashing hard. She pulled Lira out, checking her over with hands that shook. Then she turned to Jace. "You could have told them," she said, her voice hoarse. "Could have collected whatever bounty they're offering. Would have been easier than risking your ship, your freedom." "Easier doesn't mean right." She stared at him like he was speaking another language. Her hands came up slowly, touching his chest, just her fingertips at first as if confirming he was real. Then her palms pressed flat against him, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt. "Thank you," she whispered. The moment stretched. Jace was acutely aware of her touch, the warmth of her hands, the way she looked at him with something beyond gratitude, something raw and searching. He stepped back carefully, putting space between them before he did something stupid. "We need to move," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "They're gone for now, but those tracking devices I saw on your sister, they're still transmitting. We have maybe 6 hours before someone with better sensors comes looking." Kiva's hand went to Lira's arm instinctively, touching the small raised bumps beneath her skin. "Can you remove them?" "Yeah, but it's gonna hurt, and we need to do it now." Lira looked up at him with those 2 large eyes, then nodded solemnly. Jace retrieved his medical kit from the crew quarters, the kind meant for field repairs on humans. His hands were steadier now, falling into the familiar rhythm of practical problems with practical solutions. He laid out the instruments on a clean cloth. Kiva held her sister, whispering to her in their own language, words Jace couldn't understand but recognized as comfort. Lyra's hand gripped her sister's tightly. "This is going to sting," Jace said, meeting the child's eyes. "But I'll be as quick as I can." She nodded again. He applied the local anesthetic first, waiting for it to take effect before making the first small incision. Human surgical techniques. Precise, minimal trauma designed to leave clean wounds. The tracking device came out easily once he found it, a tiny metal bead no bigger than a grain of rice. Kiva watched his hands the entire time, her breathing shallow. When he moved to the second device, her free hand reached out and rested on his shoulder. The touch was gentle, anchoring. He worked carefully, aware of her presence in a way that made his pulse quicken. The second device came free. He sealed both wounds with synthetic skin and cleaned his instruments while Kiva held her sister close. "Done," he said. "She should rest for a few hours, but she'll heal fine." Kiva looked at him, and something in her expression had shifted. The desperation was still there, but beneath it was something else, curiosity maybe, or the beginning of trust. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Jace started to answer, then stopped. He didn't have a good reason. Didn't have any reason except that turning them away felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. "Because someone should," he finally said. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder, and for a moment he thought she might kiss him again, the way she had offered herself earlier, transactional and desperate. But this was different. She just looked at him, her eyes searching his face like she was memorizing it. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "Yeah, well, neither are you." The asteroid field stretched before them like a graveyard of broken planets, tumbling rocks caught in overlapping gravitational wells. Jace's fingers moved across the controls, plotting a course that would make any sane pilot turn back. "You're going through that?" Kiva asked from behind him, her voice tight. "Around, over, under, and maybe a little bit through." 3 hunter ships had dropped out of FTL 40 minutes ago. Lira sat strapped into the navigator's seat. Kiva stood behind Jace's chair, one hand gripping the headrest. "Human pilots have a saying," Jace said, adjusting their vector as a rock tumbled past. "Any landing you walk away from is a good one." That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be. The vagrant star shuddered as he pushed the engines harder, diving between 2 massive asteroids that spun in opposite rotations. Threading the gap required timing. Jace committed. The ship scraped through with meters to spare. Kiva's hand tightened on his shoulder. He didn't shake her off. "They're still following," Kiva said. "I know." He pulled into a hard roll, using smaller rocks as cover while calculating their next move. Human pilots learned to read asteroid patterns. Most alien species preferred to go around. "Tell me about them," he said. "The hunters, what are they after?" Kiva was quiet. Her thumb traced circles against his shoulder. "My sister sees paths that haven't happened yet, thousands of possibilities overlapping." Precognition. Oracle children. 3 centuries ago they led both sides in a war. Millions died. Now any child born with the sight must be eliminated. Jace's jaw tightened. "That's not safety, that's fear." 6 months running, she said. "We had help at first, but money runs out. I chose your ship because humans keep their word. I was testing you." You were surviving. I've offered myself to 3 others. One tried to take without paying, one tried to drug us, the third took my credits and laughed. Rage flickered in his chest. You're the first who said no, she whispered. The ship lurched as an eddy caught them. Kiva stumbled, pressing against his back. He felt her warmth, her breath on his neck. Strap in, he said, voice rough. I'm fine here. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, her cheek pressed against his head, heartbeat racing. I want to see how you work, like you see the future too. Just math and instinct. You're showing me there are still good people. Jace focused on flying, on the 3 hunter ships closing the gap. They were good pilots, anticipating his moves. Can your sister help? Kiva turned toward Lira, whose eyes were unfocused, staring beyond the view screen. Lira, Kiva said softly. The girl blinked, her gaze sharpening. Her small voice was steady. Left path, the one that looks blocked. Jace saw it, a corridor between 2 asteroids that appeared to dead end. If his gravitational models were correct, that 3rd asteroid would rotate just enough to open a gap. If wrong, they'd pace themselves across rock. You sure? She nodded. 3 seconds after you enter, the gap opens for 7 seconds. The math checked out, but the window was suicidal. He'd have to commit before seeing the gap, trust it would be there. Behind them, hunters gained ground. How often are you right? Always, Kiva answered. When she speaks clearly, she's always right. Jace made his decision. He angled toward the corridor, pushing engines past safety limits. The ship screamed in protest. Kiva's arms tightened, her breath catching. They entered the corridor. Stone walls rushed past on both sides. The dead end loomed ahead, growing larger with terrifying speed. Jace's eyes stayed on the chronometer. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The asteroid rotated. A gap appeared, barely wide enough, spinning away. Jace rolled the ship, threading through at an angle that made the hull groan. Rock flashed past, close enough to see the pitted surface. Then they were through, bursting into open space. Behind them, 2 hunter ships tried to follow. One clipped the asteroid edge, spinning out. The other lost critical seconds. The 3rd had gone around, but Jace was already plotting the jump. His hands flew across navigation while the FTL drive spun up. Hold on, he said. Kiva's arms tightened, her lips brushed his ear. Thank you for trusting her. Thank you for trusting me. The FTL drive engaged, reality stretching around them. The asteroids vanished, replaced by the warped starfield of faster-than-light travel. Jace set course for Hell's Gate, a human mining outpost with enough chaos to hide in. He finally relaxed, hands falling from the controls. Kiva's embrace loosened but didn't release. She stayed pressed against his back, her breathing slowing to match his. We're safe, he said. For now. For now is enough. Lira unbuckled and came to stand beside them. Her small hand touched Jace's arm, and she was smiling. Actually smiling. You believed me, she said simply. You were right, that makes it easy. No one believes me, they're too scared. Jace ruffled her white hair gently. I'm not scared of you, kid. I'm scared of the assholes chasing you. There's a difference. Kiva's hand found his, fingers lacing through his. The gesture was intimate in a way her earlier proposition hadn't been. This was choice, not transaction. Where are we going? Outpost called Hell's Gate. We can resupply, get you new identification, figure out the next move. And after that? Jace turned in his seat, finally facing her. Her eyes held his, searching. Behind the exhaustion and fear was hope, fragile, tentative but real. After that, we figure it out together. Her smile was small but genuine, transforming her face into something that made his chest ache. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her lips met his, soft, tentative, tasting like gratitude and promise, and the beginning of something he'd thought he'd lost. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his. I'm glad I chose your ship, she whispered. Yeah, me too. Hell's Gate clung to a barren moon, jagged metal and flickering lights. Ships clustered around docking platforms. Nobody asked questions here. Jace guided the vagrant star through approach, 36 hours without sleep weighing on him. Kiva stood beside him, Lira against her side. We can hide here, Jace said. Arrange new identities. The docking clamps engaged, proximity alarms shrieked. 3 contacts dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. The hunters had followed them somehow. How? Kiva breathed, her face pale. I removed the tracking devices. Jace's mind raced. The devices had been a decoy, something obvious to find. The real tracker was something else. His eyes fell on Lira. Does she have any implants? Medical identification? Kiva's expression crumbled. A growth regulator, implanted at birth. All our children receive them. That's how they're tracking you. The hunters were 3 hours out, but that wasn't enough time. Jace grabbed his toolkit. We remove it now. Without the regulator, she won't develop properly. She'll die if those hunters catch her. Lira climbed onto the medical bench without being asked. Jace prepped the surgical field. The implant was deep, near her spine. One wrong move could paralyze her. He made the incision following the scanner. Blue blood welled up. His hands moved with precision, cutting through tissue. Lira whimpered but stayed still. Almost there, you're doing great. The implant came free, tiny pulsing. He sealed the wound with synthetic tissue. A proximity alert chimed, a patrol interceptor detached from the outpost. Vreth, he'd been waiting. Jace ignored the hail, calculating vectors. Kiva caught his arm. We're not running again. We can't keep running forever. We fight. That ship has twice our firepower. But you have Lira. She can tell you what they'll do before they do it. Lira nodded, scared but determined. I can help. Strap in, both of you. The vagrant star detached from the dock, maneuvering thrusters firing. Vreth's interceptor accelerated to match, weapons powering up. The comm crackled. Stand down, human. Release the fugitives and you may leave unharmed. Jace keyed the transmit. Here's a better offer. Go to hell. He cut the channel and pushed engines to full burn. The interceptor gave chase, closing with frightening speed. Jace dove toward the asteroid field ringing the moon, using debris as cover. He's targeting engines, Lira said, her voice distant. Firing in 4 seconds, roll left. Jace rolled. Energy bolts streaked through space where they'd been, close enough to heat the hull. He jinked right, then down, threading between tumbling rocks. Up, 3 seconds, then hard right. He followed her instructions without question, trusting her sight. More weapons fire lanced past, each shot missing by meters. Vreth was good, but Lira was better. She could see his decisions before he made them. But they couldn't just dodge forever. Jace needed an opening. His eyes scanned the field. There, a cluster of ice asteroids, their surfaces reflecting sensor beams poorly. Natural chaff. He aimed for them, pushing engines past safety limits. Behind them, Vreth maintained pursuit, relentless and precise. He's going to fire missiles, Lira said. 10 seconds. They'll track us through the ice field. Can they track him? She blinked, focus sharpening. Yes, if he's close enough. Jace smiled grimly. He had an idea, but it required perfect timing and a willingness to play chicken. He angled toward the largest ice asteroid, accelerating directly at it. What are you doing? Kiva demanded. Something stupid. The asteroid grew larger, filling the view screen. Collision alarms screamed. Behind them, Vreth fired missiles, 2 heat seekers locking onto the vagrant star's engines. 500 meters, Jace counted. 400, 300. Jace, Kiva's hand gripped his shoulder. 200. At 100 meters, he killed the engines completely and fired every maneuvering thruster at once. The vagrant star flipped end over end, momentum carrying them forward while the nose pointed backward. The missiles, locked on the now cold engines, continued toward the asteroid. Vreth, following too close, had no time to adjust. The missiles impacted, detonating in a chain reaction. The explosion vaporized tons of ice into superheated steam and debris. Vreth's interceptor plowed into it, shields flaring. The energy discharge overloaded his systems. Jace reignited engines and dove away, using the chaos as cover. By the time Vreth's systems rebooted, they were gone, lost in the maze of asteroids and mining traffic. Did we lose him? Kiva asked. For now. Jace set course away from Hell's Gate, away from the hunters. They couldn't stay, couldn't stop, but they'd bought themselves time. He slumped in his seat, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Kiva's hands found his shoulders, kneading the tension there. Her touch was gentle, grounding. "That was insane," she said softly. "Welcome to my life." Lira unbuckled and came to stand beside him. She looked tired, drained from using her ability so intensely, but she was smiling. "You flew the path I showed you, exactly right. You showed me the way, I just followed." She wrapped her arms around his waist, hugging him. The gesture was so simple, so trusting that it made his throat tight. Kiva's hands slid from his shoulders to his chest, her body pressed against his back. He felt her breath on his neck, warm and close. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Jace looked at the star map, at the vast emptiness between systems. They couldn't hide forever, couldn't run forever, but maybe they didn't have to. "I know someone," he said slowly. "A colony in the outer reaches. They take in people who need to disappear. It's not completely safe, but it's safer than this." "How long?" 3 days, if we're lucky." Kiva was quiet for a moment, then her lips brushed his ear, sending electricity down his spine. "Then we have 3 days," she whispered. "Just us." Jace turned in his seat, finally facing her. Her eyes held heat and promise and something deeper he didn't have words for. 3 days before they reached the colony. 3 days before decisions had to be made. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. She leaned in, and this time when she kissed him, there was no hesitation. Just want and need, and the desperate knowledge that they'd earned this moment. Her hands slid into his hair, pulling him closer. He stood, his hands finding her waist, the curve of her hip. Lira quietly slipped away to the crew quarters, giving them privacy. The door hissed shut. Kiva's fingers worked at the fastenings of his jacket, her touch urgent. He backed her against the bulkhead, his mouth trailing down her neck to where her pulse beat rapid beneath blue skin. She gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Jace," she breathed. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, needing to be sure this was what she wanted, that it wasn't gratitude or survival instinct. "Tell me to stop and I will." Her smile was fierce. "Don't you dare stop." She kissed him again, deeper this time, all the fear and desperation of the past days transmuting into something hot and consuming. They moved together toward his quarters, shedding clothes and barriers both, finding comfort in skin and touch, and the simple human need for connection. For the first time since this had started, Jace let himself hope that maybe they could have this. Maybe they could have more than just survival. 2 days had passed since Hell's Gate, 2 days of stolen moments and pretending the universe outside didn't exist, but it always came calling. Jace woke to find Kiva watching him, her expression serious. "What happens when we reach the colony?" she asked. "They'll take you in, give you new identities, you'll be safe." "And you?" "I go back to salvage runs." She crossed to him, her hands finding his face. "You saved us, risked everything, and now you're just gonna leave?" "It's what's best for you and Lira. You need stability." "I don't want safe if it means losing you." Her kiss was fierce. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Look me in the eye and tell me you want to go back to being alone." He couldn't. These 2 refugees had become family. "Then we make a different life," she said. Lyra's voice interrupted from the cockpit. "Jace, there are ships, a lot of ships." They both froze. Jace was moving before conscious thought caught up, pulling on his jacket and heading for the cockpit. Kiva followed close behind. The sensor display showed 12 military vessels blockading the colony's coordinates. "They extrapolated our vector," Jace said. "Can we go around?" "Not without them seeing us." Lyra's eyes went distant. "If we go through, 93% we get captured, 7% we die." Jace stared at the impossible odds. "What if we don't go to the colony? What if we go deeper into the void? There's an abandoned human colony out there. Old survey data. Long shot, but it might be habitable." Lyra's eyes refocused, and she smiled. "I see it. 68% we make it." Kiva's hand found his. "Better odds, we go deeper." Jace plotted the new course, away from safety, into the unknown. The vagrant star changed vectors. 3 ships broke formation to intercept. "Just 3 military interceptors," Kiva said. "I've beaten worse odds." Jace pushed engines to maximum. The interceptors chased cautiously. Jump in 90 seconds. They'll track the vector. Let them. We'll jump again, make them chase shadows. The FTL drive spun up. The interceptors fired too late. The ship vanished. They jumped 3 more times over 6 hours, burning fuel recklessly. Each jump took them deeper into the void. Finally, sensors found it, a small terrestrial world with breathable atmosphere, the abandoned colony. There, Jace said, his voice rough with exhaustion. That's our new home. The vagrant star descended through the atmosphere, passing over forests and plains, and a small settlement huddled against a river. Empty buildings, overgrown streets, but structurally sound, a ghost town waiting for new life. Jace set them down in what had once been the main square. The engines wound down with a tired sigh that matched his own. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd actually made it. Kiva's arms wrapped around him from behind, her cheek pressing against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on us. I never could, not from the moment you knocked on my cargo bay door." She turned his chair, pulling him to his feet, and kissed him slowly. This wasn't desperation or heat. This was promise. This was choice. When they broke apart, Lira was standing in the doorway, looking between them with knowing eyes. "The paths are clearing," she said quietly. "I can see us here, building something, together." "All 3 of us?" Kiva asked, looking at Jace. He looked around his ship, at the life he'd built around isolation and loneliness. Then he looked at the 2 people who'd turned that life inside out in less than a week. "Yeah," he said, "all 3 of us." They unsealed the airlock and stepped out onto alien soil. The air smelled like rain and growing things. The sun was warmer than Earth's, but not uncomfortably so. In the distance, the abandoned buildings waited, full of possibility. Jace had spent years running from attachment, from responsibility, from anything that might hurt when it ended. But standing here with Kiva's hand in his and Lira's trusting smile turned up at him, he realized he'd been running from the wrong thing. He'd been running from life. "What do we do first?" Kiva asked. Jace looked at the settlement, at the work ahead of them, making a home from ruins, building a life from nothing. It should have been daunting. Instead, it felt like the first real thing he'd done in years. "First," he said, pulling her close, "we figure out which building has the best view, then we start making this place ours." Lira ran ahead, exploring with the fearless curiosity of a child who finally felt safe. Kiva leaned into Jace, her head on his shoulder as they walked. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for saying no that first night, for seeing me as more than what I was offering. You were never just that, not for a second. I know, that's why I'm thanking you." They reached what had once been a house, 2 stories, windows intact, solar panels still functional. Lira was already inside, her voice echoing through empty rooms as she claimed a space for herself. Jace and Kiva stood on the threshold, neither quite ready to step through. This was the moment, the decision point. They could still go back, still find another solution. Nothing was permanent yet. Kiva squeezed his hand. "Are you sure? This isn't the life you planned." "Plans change, people change. Because of us. Because of you." She smiled, fierce and bright, and pulled him through the doorway. Inside, Lira called for them to see something she'd found. Outside, the settlement waited for them to bring it back to life. The vagrant star sat in the square behind them, engines cooling, ready for whatever came next. Maybe they'd use her for supply runs to distant systems. Maybe they'd strip her for parts. Or maybe she'd just sit there, a reminder of how far they'd come. Jace Cordovan, salvage pilot, had spent 3 years alone. But Jace Cordovan, partner and guardian, had 3 lifetimes of work ahead of him. The difference was everything. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't running. He was home,